We good to go? Good. Well, hi everyone, good morning. Thanks for coming. It's great to be here with the Minister of Agriculture and Forestry, Todd McClay, and Minister of Energy, Honourable Simon Watts, to talk to you about the National League Government's ambitious work to cut red tape in our planning system. You've heard us say many times from the Prime Minister down that our planning system is broken. It's a handbrake on the economic growth that we need and the cause of many of our challenges across the economy. The reality is the RMA embeds a culture of no. And as a country, we have to start saying yes a lot more. And reforming the RMA is a key part of this puzzle. We have been focused on delivering radical reforms to our planning system. Phase 1 of our plan began immediately after coming into office, repealing the Labour government's reforms. They would have made things worse, not better. Phase 2 involves a range of changes to the existing RMA in the interim before we get into Phase 3, which is full replacement of the RMA with a more enabling system based on property rights. Today we're here to talk about Phase 2. During Phase 2, we've already passed a bill last year, and particularly in relation to the primary sector. Another one is about to come back from Select Committee, and we passed the Fast Track Approvals Act last year to get nationally and regionally significant infrastructure built faster. The final piece of the puzzle is national direction, and today we are announcing consultation will begin today on the biggest change to national direction since the RMA came into force in 1991. This planning system will fundamentally change the way our economy operates for the better. It will be cheaper, faster and more efficient. Kiwis are not willing to wait for full replacement of the RMA, which will be in law by the end of next year and take effect in 2027. Our country is desperate for growth right now, and that's what today's national direction changes are all about. National direction, I want to be really clear, is the meat on the bones of the RMA. It sits beneath the statute, and decision makers under the RMA have to comply with national direction. It provides the details to decision makers in the planning system. So when councils are issuing consents or making their plans, they look to national direction to guide them. There's two types. There's national policy statements and national environmental standards. These instruments are powerful. They can permit certain activities, provide policy guidance for resource consent decisions, as well as introduce nationally consistent rules and standards. When we were designing this package, we had three goals in mind. First, they had to have immediate and meaningful effect on the ground right now. They had to focus on delivering our key priorities to supercharge economic growth, and they had to not require millions and millions of dollars of implementation fees from councils. You've got to remember, once we change the RMA, there will be an entirely new system in place from 2027, and so we don't want to have councils spending millions of dollars and spending endless hours going through plan changes right now, only to have to redo them all again. And I'm really confident that the package we've come up with delivers on these goals. So today we're announcing consultation on three packages of national direction. The consultation opens today and will last until the 27th of July this year. The fourth package around housing will be released in the next week or so. It's broader than what we're consulting on today, and we'll ask New Zealanders how they see housing operating in the new RMA framework that we've already outlined, and I'll have more to say about that in the coming weeks. The changes I want to stress are highly technical. That is the nature of the RMA. And so the documents are technical and they are complicated, but they are extremely important. And I want to acknowledge Alan McDonald from the EMA who's here, who's played a role over many years actually in the detail of the RMA. We're going to run through some highlights between the three of us and then we'll have to take questions. Package 1 is about infrastructure and development. In the RMA right now, there is no instrument that clearly states that infrastructure development is a good thing. That makes it harder for decision makers to properly take into account the clear and undeniable benefits of infrastructure development in our towns and cities. So the national direction changes we're announcing will include a new piece of national direction, a national policy statement on infrastructure. This is something that the sector has asked for a long time. We are delivering on it. We're also proposing action to help tackle our housing crisis. There'll be new national direction on granny flats, which we've already announced, and the detail is here today, but also papakāinga housing. So there are inconsistent rules for papakāinga housing in district plans around the country. They prevent Maori landowners from using their own whenua in many cases. We're proposing a set of national standards to reduce these barriers for housing. The Granny Flat changes and the Papakainga changes sit alongside the changes that Chris Penk is making to the building and construction sector to remove the requirements for a building consent. There will also be a new national policy statement on natural hazards to provide clarity to councils in the way in which they manage things like flood zones to keep homes and communities safe. Minister Watts is now going to take you through the energy changes.
Well, thank you very much, Minister Bishop. So also in Package 1 are a range of changes to existing instruments to help support this government's agenda to supercharge renewable energy in New Zealand. We need billions of dollars of investment in the coming years in renewable energy supply. But currently, it is far too hard to consent renewable energy projects. We're proposing a strengthened national policy statement for renewable electricity generation. The current NPS was drafted in 2011. It is far too vague and too woolly. Decision makers need clear guidance that renewable energy is vital for our prosperity. Right now, New Zealand's energy infrastructure is vulnerable to severe weather events and seasonal shortages. By also changing the electricity generation and transmission national direction, we can improve both energy security and affordability, while helping us to achieve our goals of doubling renewable energy by 2050. The changes will also support the country's existing renewable energy assets, including lines networks. We're also changing the national direction on electricity transmission to simplify consenting and reduce costs, as well as proposing changes to help deliver more public EV chargers. A range of new permitted activity rules will make it easier to build EV chargers across the country. I'll now hand over to Minister McClay.
Back to me.
Oh, Bishop.
One other thing is we are modernising the standards around the delivery of telecommunication poles. The standards around building cell phone towers have not been updated since 2016. They are now widely out of date, and so we're updating those. On to Package 2, the primary sector, which Minister McClay will talk to. We're amending a range of existing instruments to streamline and remove many of the burdensome regulations holding our primary sector back from growth. One other change that I think is really important before I hand over to Minister McClay is quarrying and mining. It is a cold, hard fact that New Zealand needs more quarries. We make them far too hard to build, and once they are built, we make them far too hard to expand. We need quarries for roads and construction, and a major driver of the cost of building a new road is the fact that it is hard to get aggregate and fill and the material from quarries. We need more of them. So the rules we are proposing today streamline and simplify the rules around quarries and mining across multiple pieces of national direction, and it will make it easier to get a consent for a quarry and a mine, helping New Zealand deliver the infrastructure that we know that we need. Now over to Minister McClay, and then we will take your questions.
Chris, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. The primary sector underpins New Zealand's economy and the standard of living. We can be very proud of our farmers and foresters who work hard every day to produce high quality, some of the highest quality, safest food and fibre anywhere in the world. They export, and it provides income for so many New Zealanders. But for far too long, government rules have held them back, that stop them innovating, and have added unreasonable and unnecessary cost to production, which in turn pushes up the cost of food. When farmers and foresters do well, our country does well. Frustratingly, New Zealand's primary producers have struggled against overly restrictive, confusing and duplicative regulations that have kept being piled on. Today we're proposing to cut these through a number of these, letting farmers get back to doing what they do best, which is to farm. National campaigned on removing LUC 3 land from the structures of the National Policy Statement on Highly Productive Land, and I'm pleased to confirm that proposal. And amendments will do exactly that. These changes will allow farmers to do more with their land. We're also consulting on creating special agricultural areas around key horticultural hubs like Pukekohe and Horowhenua to continue to protect prime growing lands in these areas. These changes will remove the restrictions on non-intensive grazing of beef cattle, deer and wetlands, the significant cost on farmers of fencing off cattle and deer from wetlands on low-intensity properties was way out of proportion to environmental risk and benefit. The other changes will streamline consent conditions for aquaculture sector, reduce inefficiencies for the forestry sector, and better enable priority activities in coastal areas. All of these changes will make it easier to invest on farm, lift productivity, and build long-term resilience in the face of weather and market challenges. It's about freeing farmers up to do what they do best, producing high-quality food and fibre for New Zealand and for the world without being buried in paperwork. Package 3, Freshwater, proposes to replace the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management 2020 and related regulations with a more practical, efficient, regionally adaptable system. This is a key to step towards restoring balance in how freshwater is managed across the country and ensuring the interests of all water users, including farmers, growers and rural communities, are properly reflected. Our proposed changes would replace the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management 2020 and the National Environmental Standards for Freshwater. Give councils greater flexibility to balance environmental goals with economic impacts and allow longer timeframes to reach targets where needed. Remove unnecessary consents for practices like crop rotation or enable commercial domestic vegetable growing. Support long-term water security by enabling water storage, improve the protection of drinking water sources, and review and simplify data requirements under synthetic nitrogen fertiliser regulations. Changes would also simplify rules and restrictions in relation to wetlands and culverts regarding fish passage. The current system's Te Mana o Te Wai has caused frustration across rural New Zealand, with some councils applying it in a way that sidelines the very people working to improve water outcomes. We're proposing practical farmer-focused reforms that will restore confidence and reduce red tape while still delivering environmental gains. We've heard from farmers across the country that nationally determined bottom lines are not always appropriate and can be unachievable, even in some catchments dominated by native bush. They also take away flexibility from local communities to achieve the environmental outcomes that they want. We're putting outcomes ahead of process and backing rural New Zealand to be a part of this solution. The move follows the government's decisive intervention in 2024 to stop the Otago Regional Council from pushing ahead with a freshwater plan that would impose unnecessary cost and uncertainty on all rural landowners. I'll now pass back to Chris.
Thank you, Todd. So as you can see, there's a substantive amount of detail to these packages. The changes are technical and complex, but they do have a big impact on the economy. So these are now open for consultation. The law requires us to consult on these changes, and we are looking forward to the feedback from users of the system, and then Cabinet will consider the revised proposals, if indeed they are revised, and we're hoping to do that in the final quarter of the year, once the feedback's received, and get these into law by the end of the year. With that, happy to take your questions.
Will these changes need legislation?
No, so they don't require legislation. The whole point of this process is that we can make them as a cabinet, but we're required under Section 46A of the RMA to go through a statutory consultation process. So that's what we're doing today, and you'll see that the discussion documents are quite formally written, and they're formally written for a reason, which is that we have to comply with the law. So we're going out to the public and saying, here's what the government's proposing, here's what we think the changes will do, here's how we've worded them, and we're looking forward to feedback, and that's the statutory process. The freshwater document is a little bit different in the sense that rather than specific proposals, we have a range of options in relation to some issues, and so that will go through a two-stage process where we consult with this discussion document, and then we will likely go back out, we will have to go back out with a series of specific proposals in relation to freshwater. without getting overly complicated about it, there are interactions with the RMA Amendment Bill number 2, particularly in relation to energy, which is before Parliament right now, and we're hoping to have into law by the end of July.
So these national policy statements, are these a stopgap measure, or are they going to continue after the reforms start?
Yeah, so one of the other things we've been really careful to do is design these in a way where they can port into the new system. So Cabinet has made decisions about the structure and the architecture of the new planning system, which is what we've called Phase 3 of the RMA, so having a Planning Act and a Natural Environment Act. And one of the things that will sit beneath those two new acts will be national direction. So the national policy statements that we are consulting on today, the intention is, as much as possible, they will port into the new system. So yes, they provide immediate benefits right now in the sense that once they're into law and take legal effect, they impact on council plans, they impact on council decision making and consent applications and decision makers under the system, but they will also port into the new system. And one of the things we've been doing over the last 12 months or so is getting the balance right between getting some things done that New Zealanders want us to get done. They want to make it easier to build a house. They want to make it easier to farm. They want to make it easier to get renewable energy. But they also want us to fundamentally replace the system as well. And so we're trying to do both at the same time. That does introduce some complexity, but I reckon we've got the balance about right.
So RMA Reform Parliamentary Under Secretary Simon Port is not mentioned in the statements put out today, but he's released his own under the ACT Party banner, calling for Te Mana o Te Wai to be completely scrapped, but it looks like that's not what the government's proposing. Has there been some disagreement there?
No. Simon will be making that in his capacity as ACT Party spokesperson, and he's very entitled to his views, as is the ACT Party. We have put forward a options paper in relation to Freshwater. There are coalition commitments around rebalancing Te Mana o Te Wai to reflect the interests of all water users, and that's what the document puts forward. That is really important, I think, and we'll be giving effect to that. And Simon's entitled to his views. He's been a part of the development of these packages, particularly around the infrastructure the chapter that we've published, because he's my Undersecretary for Infrastructure and he's had some involvement in the National Policy Statement.
What will this mean for councils? So you expect to get these in place by the end of this year, is that correct?
Yes.
Whilst also passing RMA Amendment 2
yes.
this year, and then reforming the entire RMA system in 2 years.
Yes.
Do you accept that this will cause a lot of cost and complexity for councils?
No, I don't. And the reason we have taken a bit of time, frankly, to do this is precisely to avoid that. So what we could have done is started in our time in government and published just discussion document after discussion document, proposal after proposal, and spent the last 18 months or so doing that. That would have been enormously burdensome for people to respond to. What we've done is deliberately taken an integrated approach and done it all at the same time. That's why you've seen 5 press releases issued today. There's lots of different names on them. And we're amending 12 different instruments and creating 4 new instruments. And the reason why we've done it all together is because they all have interactions, right? So if you want to make it easier to do quarries, I think in relation to quarries, there's 4 different national direction instruments that are affected by the new rules around quarrying. So we've done it in a coherent, integrated way. And we've done it in a way, as I said in my opening remarks, in a way that will minimise costs for council. So a national policy statement on infrastructure sets high-level objectives that will affect the consent decision-making under the RMA. And the National Environmental Standards, they just port straight into district plans. So National Environmental Standard for granny flats, for example, councils don't have to go through a process around what that will be. We're setting it for them. Papakainga, same thing. They don't have to go through amending their district plans. The National Environmental Standards are the national rules. So the councils don't have to do anything. They just have to apply the environmental standards that the system is setting now. Telecommunications facilities, same thing. You don't have to go through a resource plan change process around, the maximum height for telecommunication towers. We've set that from the centre, so they don't have to do any of that stuff.
As an example, Contact Energy had a very highly publicised kind of refusal
yes.
for its wind farm in Southland earlier
yes.
this year. The CEO was very critical of the existing kind of planning processes.
Yes.
Minister Watts, would you expect, under this national direction, that a project like that would be consented?
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, absolutely. They've already reapplied under the new government's fast-track process. But in short, the changes that we're making today will make it easier and faster to build more energy generation and more assets across multiple sectors in this country. And I think that's the key aspect we need as part of dealing with the challenges we have in the energy sector.
Can I just clarify a point sort of related to that one? So the NES and the NPS, they will set maximum standards, won't they? The councils won't be able to come in and set their own. For example, there's a project up on North Harbour where council changed its own rules on floodplains halfway through it. And they were right at the end of their consenting process and had to relaunch the thing on a much higher standard. So that will take away that setting of 69, 72, whatever the number of district and regional councils we've got. They won't be allowed to apply their own rule.
Well, I'm not familiar with that. Not familiar with that specific example. We can talk about it, but the National Environmental Standards set a standard that goes into district plans. So if you take granny flats, for example, it says that councils it essentially becomes a permitted activity to build a granny flat up to 70 square metres, and anything beyond that needs a resource consent, but anything below that doesn't. And so that's the whole point about standardisation. That these powers have existed in the RMA for many years. Haven't been used properly, we would argue, and so we're making use of the existing tools. But as I say, we are fundamentally changing the operation of the RMA and the underlying precepts in the RMA. But there will be national standards in the new RMA, and so the intention is that these will port across into the new system.
Minister, just going back to package one, how will the government's Papakainga initiatives help make housing more affordable?
So Papakainga, for example, is something that some councils do quite well. It's been quite interesting as we've kind of done a bit of pre-consultation on it. You know, there has been some feedback from Maori Land Trusts and iwi, for example, that some councils are quite facilitating, but some are not, frankly, and it's just not been a priority for them. So we're saying when you've got PSGEs with land, or you've got Maori Land Trusts, or you've got a variety of different ownership structures out there around Maori land, and you've got people who want to use their whenua to put in place Papakainga housing, sort of more communal style housing. That is part of the housing answer. As you've heard me say many times, there's no one silver bullet to our housing crisis. We just need more houses. We need more granny flats, we need more Papakainga, we need more apartments, we need more terraces, we need more mansions, we need more small apartments. We just need all of the above, and we need more choice. And so this is about unlocking the potential, partly about unlocking the potential of Maori land. Now, I'm not pretending it's the answer to everything. There's a whole lot more we need to do on that, and Tama Potaka's doing a really good job on it. But it will allow for more housing choice, and the simple point is this: it will make it easier for Maori to build Papakainga housing, and that is a good thing.
And what type of affordable housing does that look like in the government's plan?
Well, it will depend on what people want to do. I mean, there's a range of different things out there. I mean, if you go up north, there's some really successful Papakainga housing development, which is more affordable rentals for Kaumatua, for example, looking after kuia and Kaumatua, close to ancestral lands in a sort of collective, almost collective style living arrangements. There's this sort of other groups tend to do more family units. It'll depend, and ultimately we don't settle that. I mean, people will respond, and iwi and hapu will respond in the way they wish to respond. That's over to them. We're just our role: make the rules easier, make it easier for them to use their whenua, and that's what we're all about as a government: making it easier for people to do things. It's too hard to do stuff in this country, and we're about making it easier.
This is a weakening of environmental standards, though, right? So, like, you're clearly kind of prioritising economic interests in the state's farmers with freshwater standards over potentially some of the more stringent or kind of more restrictive standards that we've seen in the past.
Well, I think I wouldn't necessarily characterise it like that. This is about making it easier for things that New Zealanders need to get through the consenting process. So if you take a quarry, for example, there are really restrictive rules around wetlands, indigenous biodiversity that make it all but impossible, frankly, to consent a quarry. That is a major driver of the cost of road construction in New Zealand. We need more quarries. Like, it's just basically impossible to consent a quarry. We need them. And so we are quite deliberately changing the rules around that. I'll let Todd speak to the farming changes, but I would regret the characterisation that this is a wholesale weakening of environmental standards.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's not at all. It's actually being practical and focusing on the outcome, what you're trying to achieve. So there are examples around the country where councils were interpreting the direction the previous government had set and what it meant for them. And there are cases down in Otago where they were saying all farmers had had to move their fences back 5 or 10 metres from a waterway. There was one proposal being worked up that said foresters were not allowed to plant trees within 100 metres of waterway. And actually what we're saying to them is, of course, we need better water quality outcomes, but it has to be based on something we'll achieve rather than just taking land away and making it non-productive. And whether it's 100 metres or 5 metres from where you should plant trees, it should be based on evidence. So we're setting those standards, and in the forestry sector looking to say that if a council wants to go further, it has to be based on evidence, not just that somebody in a council has decided it's a good idea. We want better outcomes. Farmers are up for working with councils. I know many councils themselves are quite frustrated with the burdensome, difficult, long, expensive processes they have to go through, whereas actually by working together we can get not only better outcomes for freshwater, we can be much more productive as a country.
So currently, you talked about kind of grazing and low intensity properties, how there's a requirement for farmers to kind of fence off waterways. I don't see how you can not characterise it as an environmental kind of weakening if you have to remove, if there won't be those fences.
Well, if you take sheep or beef, where on a hectare they may run only a few animals, the requirement to then go and fence all waterways, some of which are meaningful, some are not, is an arbitrary rule that says you must treat all parts of the country the same. So it doesn't say animals are allowed in waterways. The law is very clear on that, but it's how farmers go about that and what the cost would be. Here is an example of this. Take deer, because they would also be captured. If you see a deer fence compared to a normal fence, where councils are saying all parts of land need to be fenced off for waterways because of deer, the costs are prohibitive. It means that actually you can't farm anymore. So farmers themselves will have the options through their farm plans to make decisions about how they keep animals out of waterways, rather than a prescriptive approach that says we must fence the whole country off.
Do you know what the actual kind of threshold is for like a low intensity property? How many kind of stock?
So that's being widely consulted on, but again, it should be evidence based rather than us making it up ourselves. So that's to be consulted on, is my point. But ultimately, it shouldn't just be a decision that we make. It should be based upon evidence.
The actual kind of threshold of what a low intensity property is?
So that would lead to the point of saying that all parts of the country are the same, and that is what we're saying. They're not. So actually for different areas. But no, so what I'm saying to you, part of what we consult on is actually, what would be fit for purpose for different areas. But the point would be where there are a few animals there in an area of low intensity activity, in a catchment that actually is not in harm's way, the idea that you must fence all waterways in itself is the only way to improve water quality is something that we're looking at.
Okay.
Just got a couple more.
Yep.
For you.
Go for it.
How will your new direction for the RMA help first-time buyers?
Well, ultimately, when it comes to housing, we're all about making it easier to build houses. And across my housing and RMA portfolios, we've got a range of work underway around that. Granny flats, for example, will be easier under the changes we're announcing today. Papakāinga housing will be easier under the changes we're announcing today. In a week or so's time, you'll see me announce a range of proposals around going up inside our city, so more apartments, smaller apartments that will be allowed that are currently impermissible, so going up and allowing for greater density in cities like Auckland and Wellington, but also making it easier for our cities to expand out at the city fringe as well. Suburban greenfield housing development has a role to play in New Zealand. Ultimately, the best way to help first home buyers is more supply of houses, and that is what will fundamentally solve New Zealand's housing challenge. And our planning rules make it too hard to build houses and zone for housing, and that is the whole thrust of our housing policies. So you will see home ownership get better as a result of the changes we are announcing today. And of course, the other thing I would say is, at a more macroeconomic level, another good way to get people into home ownership is get interest rates down. And this government's strong fiscal discipline and a focus on cost control and not having a spending blowout like we saw under the previous government has meant that the Reserve Bank can lower the OCR. That is flowing through to lower interest rates. That is making it easier for people to get into home ownership. And you're starting to see that those things come through the numbers, which is a good thing.
And one last one. As Associate Finance Minister, do you think it's fair that MPs get a superannuation subsidy up to 2.5 times their contribution while the government is cutting its KiwiSaver contribution for everyone else?
Well, those decisions are not ones for me. They're made independently of us as politicians by the Independent Remuneration Authority, so that they make those decisions. We don't have any say in them.
Minister, I just wanted to just go and mining
Yeah.
on Māori land. What are those discussions like with the government and iwi when it comes to resources and usage of Māori land?
In relation to quarries in particular? Well, there's clearly a sensitivity there around that. There's a range of proposals in the discussion documents around protections around that, which you can see in the documents. They are highly technical, and so we are publishing them in good faith and putting them out there and saying, let's see what people say about them, and there'll be, I think, quite a lot of feedback from iwi and PSGs, but also from the broader infrastructure sector, the quarrying sector. There'll be lots of time to digest those, and then we'll come up with final proposals and final decisions later on in the process.
Can iwi feel confident, though, with this proposal going forward, those existing agreements through their settlements?
It's a bottom line for this government to protect treaty settlements. So that is very important. It's reflected in all two coalition documents that the Crown will honour treaty settlements that were entered into in good faith by the Crown over many years and by iwi. We will protect them and we will honour them, and through our RMA changes we've been really careful to have that as a bottom line, and through the new RMA that we are developing we've made a commitment that treaty settlements that the Crown has entered into will be honoured will be protected and transformed, and they'll be protected and transplanted into the new system. Now, there's a degree of complexity around that, and we're engaged with discussions with a range of iwi around exactly how we do that. Some are a bit more bespoke than others, some are easy, others are a bit more complicated, as is often the way. But look, there's good faith on either side. When there's a will, there's a way. I'm really determined to get it right, and I'm really confident we can. All right, thanks very much, everyone. Appreciate it. Oops.